Good morning. I want to welcome you to another segment of the Jermaine Brown Sports Talk Show. Today is Sunday, October the 15th, 2023. First of all, I want to start off by wishing everyone, I hope they've had a pretty good weekend before a new week. Well, this actually starts the new week this week. But what I wanted to get to was a game that took place late on Friday, around 10 p.m. on Friday on the East Coast here anyway, between Colorado and Stanford. And Deion Sanders and Shedeur Sanders, those two in particular, have to be very careful. And I'm going to explain to you why. I'm going to get to Shedeur Sanders a little later on my show. But I want to first start off with prime time. Prime time. Prime time. First of all, I'm a big fan of that. When he was, in the NFL, what they would call him prime time. Prime time. When he stepping as he carried the ball after intercepting the ball, and stuff like that. And so, he was a great cornerback in both Florida State, and then when he went to Dallas, he went to San Francisco, he was in Atlanta. He was just a great cornerback, one of the best football players of all time. And then he was also a pretty good baseball player as well. He played for the Yankees, the Braves, and others. But why I say he has to be very careful is that you don't want to end up becoming Charlie Strong. Now, who is Charlie Strong? He was a well-respected African-American head coach who he was under Urban Meyer when they was in Florida when they won the national championship. He was the defensive coordinator. Then he basically took the job there at Louisville in 2010. Now, Louisville was a bottom feeder from program because they fell on some hard times after the Bobby Petrino fiasco and stuff like that. They fell on some hard times, and they were bottom feeding program in the Big East because they were in the Big East at the time. And in 2010, and so he took over the program, and in 13 games. The first couple of years, in 2010 and 2011, he led them to 7 victories, 6 losses. So if you win 6 games or more, you are guaranteed a bowl game. So, 7 wins, 6 losses, those are what you call mediocre seasons. But for him, those were good seasons because, again, they were bottom tier program, number one. And number two, this was his first couple of years until he gets his guys in, his recruiting. Then he went 11-2 and 12-1, the subsequent seasons. Now, those are considered great seasons by any standard, by any metric, by any program that's not Alabama, Georgia, the top tiers. 11-1 would be considered a great year for those schools. But 12-1, sorry, 12-1 would be considered a great year by those schools. But short of that, but those are great years. Let's just put it that way. And then he made the fatal mistake of leaving Louisville, which he built them up from a bottom tier program to a national powerhouse. Okay, because the highest that they were ranked in the preseason was 9th. They went as high as 7th. Think about this. They went as high as 7th in the nation. Do you know how difficult that is when you're not an Alabama or Georgia, one of USC, one of the top tier programs, big name schools? That's very, very difficult. And so he took them into national prominence. Then he made the career fatal mistake of taking the Texas job. Texas just fired Mac Brown in 2013, after 2013, and they were looking for a head coach. And they contacted a few head coaches. I forgot their names, I'm just going to be honest with you, but that's neither here nor there. But he was like their 3rd or their 4th choice. And it was the AD that hired him. And I remember my dad saying, Jermaine, Charlie Strong made a mistake. He should have stayed at Louisville. And I asked him, well, why would you say that? Because I thought that he upgraded by going from Louisville to Texas, because that's considered an upgrade. Texas is a better program than Louisville. He said, yes, but here's the problem. You worked hard to build up that Louisville program, and you did a great job. Stay there and continue building it. Instead, you go into a program where now expectations are going to be higher because Texas has now higher expectations. And not only that, everybody there don't want you because you was not their first choice, number one. And number two, you was going to be the first like African American head coach in that school's history. And if you know anything about that, being in a PWI, and not only on top of that, you're in the South, and those things matter. He understands history that a lot of Black folks we tend to ignore or forget about, by the way. He says, so now, because everybody don't want you, and one of the boosters even came out after he got hired, that right before he even played the game and says, I don't like the hire. I think he would make a great defensive coordinator, but a head coach, because a head coach means you are managing men. Okay, you're overseeing men and you're managing a team. And they don't, a lot of non-blacks don't want Black folks in positions like that, head coaching positions like that. So when one of the boosters said that, he said, that man just made my point and he's going to fail. And what ultimately happened? He started off 6-7, then went 5-7. And then in his final season, he went 5-7. So I remember I was down south. I was in North Carolina hanging out with my cousin Sean for Thanksgiving. And I was at his house. And I remember they just lost the game to Kansas. Now, anybody who knows anything about Kansas, back then anyway, especially back then, in the Big 12, they're considered one of the worst schools, not only in the Big 12, but in the nation. And so he came off beating, I'm talking about Texas, they came off beating schools like Notre Dame, who was pretty good, Oklahoma. And anybody who knows about the Texas-Oklahoma rivalry, the Red River rivalry, that's a big rivalry down there. And so beating those schools matters. So Texas beating Oklahoma matters. Oklahoma beating Texas, that matters. That's a big thing. And so he was a darling for winning those games, except he lost the game to Kansas, right? So I remember Mark May, who was an excellent football player for the Hogs, the Washington Redskins, they were known at the time, and he won a championship with them under Joe Gibbs. Excuse me. He was like, I think, an offensive lineman or something like that, but that's neither here nor there. He was an analyst on the show. And I remember the host saying, because see, the word was Charlie Strong was in danger of losing his job. So the host asked Mark May, should Charlie Strong keep his job? He says, well, I can make an argument for him. I mean, the team is young. He's finally getting his recruits, because it takes a couple of years to get your recruits in. Okay? It takes a couple of years to build a program. It's very difficult to come in and build a program and have the program built properly from day one. That's almost impossible because it takes a couple of years to get your players in college. So he says that, they're young. Excuse me. They're young. They're getting better. They beat Oklahoma. They beat Notre Dame. They beat this team. He says, but, however, you lost to Kansas. Kansas! You can't lose to a school like that and keep your job. And what ultimately happened? When they finished the season, he was fired. And he ended up going off to South Florida. The first year had a good year, 10-2. Okay, was nationally middle of the road, nationally ranked program, but then after that had a couple of bad seasons. Oh no, had a good season the following year, not as good the first year, but a good one the following year. But then had a bad season the third year, and now basically he got fired. See, Black coaches, especially coaches, you don't get a long leash as your white count or your non-blacks do, because I want to be PC correct here, because I don't want YouTube banning my videos. You don't get as long of a leash. So now, well, what does this have to do with Deion? This has a lot to do with Deion. Deion was having a lot of success building up Jackson State. Okay? A lot of success building up Jackson State. Then he decides, okay, let me move up into a Power 5 school like Colorado, who's a bottom tier program in the Pac-12. Bottom tier. Nobody was talking about Colorado. And yes, Colorado only won one game last year. And I hear a lot of black folks saying, well, they only won one game last year. They only expected to win 3 to 4 games this year. So what did you expect? I said, wait a minute now. Let's slow down. Number one, when you take over a program that won 0 to 1 game the previous year, you're expected to do better than winning one game. So come on, let's keep it real. It's not that difficult. Everybody and their mother knew that Deion and his team was going to win more than one game. So let's just get that all right. Hell, if you hire a halfway competent coach who does even halfway decent recruiting, he's going to win more than one game in a season. So let's keep it real. That's not an accomplishment, winning more than one game. So you didn't do anything. The only thing worse than winning one game is winning 0 games. And that's even very difficult to do at any level of college, but especially in Division I. To win 0 games. That's almost unheard of. It's rare. So anyway, at any Division I school anyway, or 1A or whatever they call it. So anyway, so let's get that they won one game out the way from the previous year. Let's get that out the way because that's insulting. Now here is a legitimate argument. They were expected to win 4 games this year. Now that is true. That is a legitimate argument. However, Deion set the expectations higher than 4 games. How do we know this? Because Deion came out and said before the season started, we're arriving. Now, see, we're coming. I'm sorry, not we're arriving. We're coming. And this is why words matter, folks. Words matter greatly. Deion took over. All of a sudden, merchandise sales went through the roof. Ticket sales went through the roof. Media, everything. Now everybody wants to see Colorado because everybody wants to see this Deion experiment here at Colorado. And then you got the people who love the move for Deion to go from Jackson State to Colorado, and you have people like me who hated the move. But I'm not rooting against rooting for him to fail. That's the difference. I hated the move, but I'm not rooting against him. I'm not rooting for him to fail. Because I don't like rooting for another black man to fail. I just have an issue with that. But that being said, that's neither here nor there. But there's a lot of people who are rooting for his failure. Who is rooting for his failure, not Art. Who is rooting for his failure. And they hated the move. And I'm going to tell you a lot of people who hated the move too, but you're not going to hear about them. Because, see, the athletic director hired Deion. Now, it was reported Colorado didn't have the money, but they had to go raise the money. Okay, fine. Regardless of whether that's true or not is irrelevant. But here is what is relevant. You know who hated those moves? Who hated the move for Deion coming to Colorado? At least a couple of those boosters. Why do I say that? Because their children plays for Colorado. And when Deion came here to Colorado, and he basically said, you're no good, you're trash, go into the transfer portal because you're not going to play. So go into the transfer portal. How you think the parents, who are boosters, and boosters is the ones who really run the universities, not the athletic director, not the chancellor, the school chancellor, or whatever you want to call them, the boosters. Because why? They come with the most important thing, the money. So they run the university. They say yay or nay. They ultimately have the final say. So they, you can best believe a couple of them, and again, it's not going to be done publicly in the media. They're going to keep that quiet. But a lot of them hated Deion for this and was against Deion and his brashness. So even though yes, they're making money, but now they're going to set this man up for failure. And here's how they're going to do it. Because you see, you got to understand, black folks, we got to understand when you're playing in their arena, and I'm talking about the PW, the non-black arena, you got to play, especially when they basically, these are their institutions. You got to play it by their rules. That's just the reality. And if you go against their rules, then you have to have a lot of success. You got to consistently exceed expectations. It's no longer enough to just be good. You're going to have to exceed expectations, or else they're going to get you out of there. And they're going to set you up and to get you out of there. I'm going to give you a perfect example. Let's take Mel Tucker. Mel Tucker of Michigan State. Now, Mel took over a program after and Tony D'Antoni. I I apologize for butchering his name, but the program went down under him after a while, and so he left under scandal. So basically, Mel Tucker took over, and they started winning. So what did Michigan State win and did? Michigan State gave him like a 10-year, $90 million contract or something like that. It was an exorbitant contract. And I said, you know what, Mel? When he had offers to maybe go to other schools, I said, Mel, don't, that's a great contract. And listen, when you get that kind of contract, you can't turn that down. Because why? He turned the program back around and they started winning. But here's the problem. Excuse me, hold on for a second. As soon as he started losing, and he only had like one losing season, which was the prior year. But as soon as he started losing, now he just got hit with a sexual harassment scandal. And he unfortunately, idiotically, played a big role in that. Why do I say that? Because he had a woman who was a rape survivor who was raped when she went to college by some athletes or some people in the school, however that went down. And you should know that when you're dealing with a rape survivor, you got to be very, very careful how you communicate with them. So apparently, she accused him of unwanted advancements or advances. However, text messages showed that it was consensual, and he said it was consensual. But what Mel Tucker failed to understand is, as a head coach, you're supposed to be a leader of men, and you're in a position of authority. Do you really want to be dealing with a rape survivor when you're supposed to be a leader of men? And you had that woman talk to your players and you're dealing with her in a romantic way. Now, they were having sexual relations over the phone. They never had sexual intercourse per se, but they were having sexual relations over the phone. So what did Michigan State just turned around and did? Not only fired him, but now they're voiding the contract, which means they're firing him for cause. So they could get out of what? Having to pay him that 70 something million dollars that they owe him. So you see how this works? They could set you up for failure. And he was set up to fail. I mean, he was set up. But unfortunately, he played a big role in his setup. And you don't necessarily have to play a role, but you can be easily set up. Now, why do I bring this back to Deion? Because you see, you got to understand, Deion, when you came and told everybody you're coming, that means you haven't arrived yet. You're coming. But everyone acknowledged it was going to take a couple of years for you to get your guys in there. And you did a hell of a job rating the transfer portal to get the players you did get. And notice that they now changed the rules on the whole transfer portal stuff and stuff like that. That was to hurt Deion, but we'll get into that in another time. But Now check this out. But then after your team which was projected to only win about 4, no more than 5 games, your team started off 3-0. You was like the hottest team in the nation. You was the most talked about team in the nation. And then you came out and said, "We've arrived. We're here." When you say you're here, that means you've arrived. If you've arrived, that means now I can compete. Not we're going to exceed expectations and greatly exceed expectations. As a matter of fact, when you tell me you've arrived, now that means I'm expecting you to compete for the conference championship, which would probably get you into the playoffs, which means now I'm expecting you to compete against the Georgias, the Alabamas of the world. That's what it means by you've arrived. That means you're here. You can compete with the best teams in the nation, if not at the very minimum, the best teams in your conference. Okay? Don't despite the fact that you barely beat Colorado State the previous week. And Colorado State's one of the lowest teams in the program. I mean, not in the program, in the conference. And really, quite frankly, you should have lost that game. Colorado State blew that game. So let's just keep it real. The first 2 games that you won cleanly. TCU, you was clearly better than. Nebraska, you was clearly better than. But Colorado State was better than you in that game. They just blew that game. But you still got the victory, so we don't believe in throwing away victories. But then here's what happened. You went against Oregon, and Oregon pulled your pants down and spanked your rear end. They gave you an old-fashioned butt whipping and showed that, no, you can't compete against the top-tier teams in the conference. You're not ready for us. You got embarrassed. Then the following week, you got embarrassed against USC until you made that fourth quarter come back to at least make it decent. But you still took an L. And the Pac-12, if anybody knows anything about the Pac-12, like the Big 12, they're not known for their defense. Those schools and those leagues are not known, and those conferences are not known for defense. You just know that if you follow anything about college football. Okay? But nonetheless, you lost. So now your 3-0 start is now 3-2. And so yeah, so because remember when you were 3-0 or 2-0, you was getting The Rock and Lil Wayne to come to your games, and they're out there and they're promoting you. I mean, this was becoming a big sideshow, and this is what they call the rise before the fall. Okay. And why? Okay, and so I'm just giving you the timeline. So then you took a bad loss against Oregon. You got your butts whooped against Oregon. You lost pretty good against USC. Then you went on the road to Arizona State. Now, anybody who knows anything about Arizona State knows that they're a bad team in the Pac-12. They're not very good. So Colorado should have won that game, if not easily, at least comfortably. They should have had a comfortable victory. Yet they were lucky to pull that game out. And then you had Shedeur Sanders flexing with his watch. And again, I'm going to get back to Shedeur a little later. Flexing with his watch to the fans like you did something. You celebrate like you beating Arizona State is a celebration? Come on, you should be ashamed that y'all barely won that game. You was expected to beat Arizona State. Hell, even Deion let it be known he was very upset at y'all play. Because Deion understands that with great expectations, the results have to follow. You can't have great expectations but mediocre results. That doesn't work. And then they played Stanford this week. Okay? Stanford, if they're not the worst team in the Pac-12, I mean, they're arguably the worst team in the Pac-12, if not the worst team in the Pac-12. And they're definitely the worst team in all of Division 1A football. Okay? They only had one victory on the season before Friday night. One. They was the Colorado. They were this year's Colorado. They really were. And they were bad. And not only were they bad, they were getting blown out in all these games. They would get blown out. Okay, and so they were getting blown out. So then they come to Boulder, Colorado. Everybody expects them to win. Hell, even I expect them to win. I said, okay, Colorado's going to get off the schneid. They're going to get an easy victory. Okay, they're going to get an easy victory. And hey, they, at least now, hey, get to 5 victories, and then now all you need is one more to qualify for a bowl. And so I'm like, all right, they'll turn it around. And then in the first half, they boat raced Stanford to being 29 points at halftime. So the score was 29-0 at half. And I mean, I didn't watch any of the game, but I was just looking at the score, and I said, okay, they got this. I can go to bed. When I woke up Saturday morning, I saw a shocker. Stanford beats Colorado, upset Colorado. How could that be? What the hell happened? So I had to at least go look at the highlights. And Stanford in the second half came back and beat them. So it's bad enough you lost to Stanford. Stanford! You can't lose the game to Stanford. But what's worse is that they came back and beat you. Arguably the worst team in the nation. Yo, Deion, bro, that can't happen. Those are the type of losses that would generally get you fired. They would get you fired. Those are the kind of losses that will get you your money. Luckily, it's your first year and you're bringing in a lot of money. Because if you wasn't bringing in a lot of money, you could have already been in trouble. But you're going to survive it the first year because why? You're bringing in a lot of money. And now the school, because of the hype of you being there and everybody expecting Colorado to be much better, the Colorado is moving from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. Now that's a much easier conference for um for Colorado to be in than the Pac-12 because the Pac-12 you got USC, Utah, Oregon, and now Washington. Those are top tier programs, and so you're not going to be good enough to beat those programs even with good recruiting. You're going to have a hard time beating those programs and winning the conference. But in the Pac-12, oops, sorry, I did pick Pac-12. I mean Big 12. Sorry, give me 1 second. I want to see their schedule. Okay, you got Baylor, BYU, University of Central Florida, University of Cincinnati, University of Houston, Iowa State, University of Kansas, Kansas State. Now, Oklahoma and Texas, they're leaving the program. I mean, leaving the conference. They're going to the SEC, so you don't have to worry about them if you're Colorado. Oklahoma State University, TCU, Texas Christian, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. So the only schools you're really going to have to worry about if you're Colorado moving to the Big 12 is Kansas, because Kansas is now a good program now. So they're a good program. You're going to have to worry about them. And TCU, you're going to have to worry about them. But these are schools you can beat because you're going to be able to out recruit them. So now you're going to be expected to win the Big 12 next year and moving forward. Short of that and making the playoffs, they're going to be considered under because if you win the Big 12, there's a good likelihood you'll be in the playoffs because they're expanding the playoffs. So the likelihood is you're going to end up in the playoffs. You're going to have to start ending up in the playoffs to start meeting expectations, given the level of excitement you're bringing to the school. Because if you don't start doing that, they're going to get your black, you know what, out of there. They're going to. It's just a matter. It's not a question of if. It's just a matter of when and how they're going to do it. You got to kind of know that that's what's getting ready to come down if you don't start exceeding expectations real quick. And because I don't think meat is going to be good enough, giving what the way you and your son have conducted yourselves. Now that brings me to Shedeur Sanders. I like Shedeur Sanders. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. If he came out in this year's draft, which I don't think he will, because Deion said that he's expecting both him and Shiloh to be back next year. So I believe that they're going to come back another year. But if he came out in this year's draft, he would be at best the third best quarterback taken, because it would be Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in all of college football, despite his bad game yesterday against Notre Dame. That aside, he's the best quarterback in all of college football. He's considered the can't miss guy, the Patrick Mahomes of Patrick Mahomes. Okay, he is that guy. He is that dude. So he's going to be the number one quarterback in this year's draft, guaranteed. Then you got Then you got Drake May. Drake May from the University of North Carolina. He got off to a little slow start there this season, but then now he has come on of late. So he's going to be the second quarterback taken, and he's non-black, so that's going to really help him. That's going to push him to be the second quarterback taken. And then you're going to have some analysts. Matter of fact, I already saw an article with some people, some so-called NFL scouts, quote unquote, is saying that he's better than Caleb Williams. He's not better than Caleb Williams, but you got some who's saying that he would be better than Caleb Williams, or is better than Caleb Williams. So we can push that to the side. But he's going to be the second quarterback taken. Shedeur Sanders, if he came out, he would be the third quarterback taken. At at the very most, he would be the third quarterback off the board, because he's just that good. He's really good. I mean, he put up great numbers at Jackson State, and he's putting up great numbers at Colorado. However, here's my problem with Shedeur Sanders. See, it's one thing for your father to be prime time, which he was when he was playing the game. Braggadocious, arrogant, whatever words you want to use, look at me, look at me. Because when you're the cornerback and you want to stand out, that's no problem. But when you are the quarterback of a team, you are basically the face of that franchise or the face of that school. You are, in essence, the CEO. You're the face. You're the everything. Because the school, as well as the team you go to at the next level, is only going to be as good as you take them. Let's just keep it real. The quarterback is the most judged position in the sport. So they expect you to act a certain way, just like you would expect the CEO to act and the leader of an organization to act a certain way. And if you don't, then you can't just be good. You have to be great. You have to exceed expectations that people will tolerate it. But it don't mean they don't like it. They'll like it, but they'll at least tolerate it. Now, Tom Brady is considered his quote unquote mentor. Everyone knows Tom. Tom was non-flashy. Tom was low-key. Shedeur Sanders is every bit the difference. And see, the biggest problem with Shedeur is before the games, some of these games, he would go out flashing his $80,000 watch and basically pointing it in the opponent's face. He did that against Colorado State. I believe it was against Colorado State, if I remember. It was either Colorado State or Nebraska. I forgot which school it was, but he did that. And that pissed off a lot of people, and I particularly didn't care for it. First of all, you should not be having an $80,000 watch on the field before or after a game. That should be kept in the locker room. Okay? And in college, I question the quarterback, even though this whole NIL thing, I question if it's smart to have an $80,000 watch on or an expensive watch on when you know most of your teammates can't afford that. To me, I have a personal issue with that, but that's neither here nor there. But you got to be very careful because, see, yes, black people is accepted now playing the quarterback position, so that they won't use against you. But here's what they will hold against you. Let's say it comes time for the draft. it comes time for the draft. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. Teams are not looking for a reason to draft you. They're looking for a reason not to draft you. And I'm talking about in the NFL. They're looking for a reason not to draft you. They're looking for a reason not to draft you, not for a reason to draft you. Now, why do I say this? Let's go back to 2005. 2005, the end of 2005, Matt Leinart, who was the quarterback for USC, he was considered the number one pick. If he came out, he would have been the number one pick. But instead, he decided to go back to school for another year for dance or whatever, just so he could stay in school. And that year, Aaron Rodgers came out and Alex Smith came out. So Alex Smith ended up being the number one pick, but he would have never been the number one pick over Matt Leinart had Matt Leinart came out. That would have never happened. But I remember then, that's when I said to my dad and cousin, I said, Matt Leinart is a loser and I don't want him. Nice guy, but he's a loser and I don't want him. So they were like, why do you say that? I said, the man doesn't have a competitive bone in his body, because why would you stay in college when you're eligible for the pros? That means you want to stay amongst the boys instead of being challenged by the men. And I use that, especially you being the quarterback, that irks me. Now, there are going to be special circumstances and exceptions to that rule, but he didn't meet one of them. And not only that, USC does not have a good history of producing NFL quarterbacks. So history was also working against him. And I said, if I am a GM, I'm not drafting him because he doesn't have a competitive bone in his body. Because what he did by coming back the following season in 2006, he was projected to be the number one player taken off the board. And he was meeting those projections except for one problem. This guy by the name of Vince Young out of Texas not only was outplaying him or was having a great season, but he outplayed him in the Rose Bowl to win the national championship. And so Tennessee ultimately took Vince Young. Now, Vince Young wasn't the first player off the board, but he was the first quarterback off the board. Because I think Mario Williams was the first player off the board, if I remember correctly, in 2006. But that's neither here nor there. But so Vince Young, and where did he ultimately go? Matt Leinart, he went like 10th or 11th down to Arizona. And he ended up having a short career because why? He loved the lifestyle of the NFL, but he didn't love the NFL. He didn't love the game. But I knew that when he chose to stay in college, when he could have went pro. And like I said, there are going to be exceptions to this rule, but that's my rule. I want a guy who's willing to take on the challenge. Now you say, well, what does Matt Leinart got to do with Shedeur Sanders? It has a lot to do with it. Here's from this standpoint. Again, what did I say a few minutes ago? Teams and GMs are looking for reasons not to draft you rather than looking for reasons to draft you. Now, I'm speaking as Jermaine, but Jermaine also puts himself in the mind of a GM and how these people think. Because remember, these people who's picking you, they don't look like me and you. They look different than me and you. And so you must understand, they're looking for a statesman, CEO type, someone responsible. See, they brought up, it was brought up, well, you didn't criticize Johnny Manziel when well, first of all, Manziel was being criticized. Maybe not to the degree that Shedeur Sanders is, but he was still being criticized. But no, you know who ended up criticizing Manziel? The talent evaluators, because why? He was supposed to be one of the best players taken that year that he came out, and he dropped all the way to the 20s. Why? Because the teams, no, we don't want a player like him at the most important position in the sport. when he was doing all that money sign and stuff like that, it worked against him. The talent evaluators used that against him. And they even came out and said as much afterwards. So what do you think they're going to do to Shedeur when Shedeur is doing this with the watch in front of opponents' faces and to fans? You're hurting yourself. Yes, you're building your brand, but at what cost? What cost? And then it was reported that at halftime, this Stanford game, instead of you focusing on and mentally preparing for the second half to finish the deal against Stanford, I guess because you're up 29-0 against Stanford, the worst team in the conference, if not the nation, you thought the game was over. I thought the game was over too, so I ain't gonna lie. I'm gonna be honest with you. So at halftime, he was pushing his merch online, his merchandise online. Because why? Hey, he's promoting himself. He's selling himself. But you're the quarterback. It looks bad that you're promoting your merch online at halftime. What are you doing on your phone at halftime? You're the quarterback of the team. You're the leader. So when I hear Deion say after the game, I question if the players love the game like I do. I love the game. I think they're in like. Well, you gotta look at your son, dogs. Does your son love the game, or is he liking everything that comes with it? Because why? Instead of him getting the team prepared to play in the second half, he's pushing his merch, his merchandise. Now, if I am a GM, I want no part of that. If I can get a quarterback just as good, I'll go somewhere else. The only way and I'm speaking as Jermaine, would draft Shedeur is he would have to be the best quarterback available when it's my time to pick. That's the only way I'm picking Shedeur Sanders now. And if he's not the best quarterback, if there's somebody equally or close or equally as good, I'm going to take them because I want a statesman. I want a leader. I want my quarterback to conduct himself a certain way. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. And I like Shedeur's game. I just don't like his mentality. I'm not looking for prime time at the quarterback position from a marketing attitude perspective. I'm looking for somebody who a Tom Brady type. Yes, I'm sorry, it is what it is. I'm looking for a Lamar Jackson type. I'm not looking for this look at me from the quarterback position. No, I'm looking for real leadership. And if you can't provide it, I'm going to look for somebody who can. That's just the reality. I want to thank you for watching another segment of the Jermaine Brown Sports Talk Show. Have a good day.